Hey there, fellow horse lovers. Welcome back to the Daily Ride podcast. My name is Morgan. I am your host, and I have a very special episode today where I introduce to you one of my personal herd members, Bee Humphries. Bee has been, I guess, kind of like my heart human. A lot of people you will hear on this podcast, myself included, understand and use the term heart horse as a soul connection with an equine partner that has allowed you to grow and will reflect back your identity when you start to stumble and forget it and when you need it most. And they provide a source of truth and encouragement in your life. And Bee has been that for me. When I was considering starting this podcast, I considered having Bee maybe co-host, but Bee, as you will quickly learn, has her hands full with a very exciting adventure of her own over this last year. I am so excited to support her on her journey and work with her in her nonprofit promoting healing for horses as well as people, kind of in tandem with a different approach than what I am aiming to do with True Heart Healing. So please enjoy this very special episode featuring a very important heart human in my own herd. And I look forward to talking with Bee on this podcast about other topics in the future. I envision True Heart Healing really complementing the services that Bee is able to provide at the BeeHorsey Ranch out in Lyman, Colorado. And I am just so blessed to have her in my life. And I'm so excited to share some of this very special relationship on my podcast with you. If you feel so called to make a donation to True Heart Healing to help us further our mission of supporting and empowering children with disabilities or life-altering illness, veterans, service members, and their families, heal, create stabilizing relationships, discover hope, and find purpose, please head on over to www.the-daily-ride.com. And we so appreciate having you here, and I so appreciate your support. So, Bee, thank you for being on the podcast. I think to start out, can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and your horse journey?
Sure. My name is Bee Humphries. I am the owner and the sole person out at my ranch, the BeeHorsey Ranch. I'm a lifelong horse girl. I don't think it's something that you come into. I think it's something you're born to. My parents can tell you that at a very young age, I attached myself to the leg of any horse that would sit still. They knew it was going to be a lifelong journey for me when my Shetland pony sat in my lap, and from that point forward, I've just always enmeshed myself in some way or other with my four-legged friends. And my current project, and I guess the rest of my life project, because I just bought a ranch in May, is that I want to combine services for human and equines. I don't want it just to be a service where people come and they're doing riding. I want it to be an equine immersion. I am committed and love mules like nobody loves mules, I gotta say. I just love my mules. But I find it interesting because a lot of people don't know a lot about mules. And this is an opportunity to have a rescue that not only rehabilitates the animal, it rehabilitates the human. And so Be Horsey, the filing for the nonprofit for it is a long time coming for me. I'm a registered nurse of 32 years. I'm a master's in nutrition and exercise physiology. I have my Yoga 500. And so when I started coming up with the concept of what I wanted to do, I want to do immersion retreats. And what that means is that on specific weekends, because as a Coloradan now, originally from Louisiana, which I wasn't prepared for snow, we don't have every weekend as a good idea to pack people into an outdoor camping situation. So instead of freezing them to death or boiling them in my silos that I'm going to turn into yurts, I'm going to do two silo style yurts in spring and in late summer, early fall. And so hopefully this next cycle of the seasons going into spring, I will have my silo yurt developed enough to where I can have 4 to 8 people come and stay for a weekend. And it would include fresh foods and goat yoga with my crazy goats that chew up everything. And more days than not, I think about giving them away. But they're here for a purpose. And, there are people that have never like pulled an egg out of a under a chicken, or I'll have some bottle babies by spring. They've never, fed a calf. And my program is not based on riding. I wouldn't want people to be on my animals unless they were really competent riders based on the fact that they've had such significant trauma. I wouldn't want to confuse them if somebody was confused at what they were doing. Naturally, you could ride anything I got out here, but I wouldn't have just somebody that was coming for a retreat jump on my mule that likes to take off. Not everybody's prepared for that.
So when I met you, shoot, it's been a couple years now, you had one horse, Buddy. Tell me about how your herd has
Yep.
evolved since then.
Well, I just had this conversation with the post office mailman, oddly enough, because I got a bunch of medications in today from a service that I have medications delivered for him. Buddy came to me as an animal that was on his way to the kill pen. He was no longer usable as a ranch horse, and he had been my horse to ride and to work cattle with. And he is a cowy dude, but Buddy's built all wrong. And if I have to say, I mean, I've had many animals, many horses, mules. Buddy is my heart horse. He's saved my life more than once. He's pigeon-toed on the front. He's blind in his right eye from a crush injury, and he had a loading accident when he was a yearling, so his skull is crushed on the right side. His eye on that side had been tattooed by somebody experimenting with tattooing pink-eyed horses, and so they accidentally severed his optic nerve on the right side, so he's blind on the right side. He had cancer in his left eye, so got that taken care of. He was dry lotted for about 10 years, so who knows what he did or how he survived that 10 years by himself with little or no attention or food or anything. But he broke his right rear fetlock. So the fact that he worked so hard just made such an impact on me. And we had a really bad crash, an end over end crash chasing a calf. And it would have been many horses kind of impulse to run and bolt because they're so startled and they're scared, and it was pretty traumatic. And he ended up with us, with chiropractic care because he had his withers were out. So he did suffer quite a bit of injury during that crash, but he came right back to me and he stood over me until I was able to get up. And I just made a pact with him. I got you for the rest of your life. No matter what happens, I got you for the rest of your life. So knowing that, Buddy was a free horse. So I would think at this point I've put about $25,000 into his care over the last 4 years, based on the fact that he was a free horse. So when people say that, I chuckle because we know the expense of what animals are, and I don't think if you are an owner, I don't think you realize the magnitude of commitment that it takes to have livestock, especially again, horse girls or mule girls or equine girls. We will cut our wrists open and bleed for them. And so Buddy was I had him, and I had other herd members I had rescued.
Where did you meet Buddy?
I met Buddy at the ranch that he came from. He was pretty much a leftover. He was the only thing left for me to ride, but nobody really
And
wanted
you
him.
were at that ranch to work cattle for them?
Mhm. Mhm.
As a cowboy, do you show up and they provide you the horse? I mean, talk me through that part of the equine world.
Depends on the it depends on the ranch, and it depends on the setup, because I was the ranch manager. for that property, the owner went off to go work. Cowboying involves a lot more than just like getting on a horse and riding a horse. Many ranches, especially if you're not an affluent ranch, they have to do a lot to be able to survive. And I can't tell you how much different things they're right now going my direction that you try to have to figure out. For a smaller ranch, you live on a shoestring budget. You don't have money to pay a lot of people. You can bring in people, what's called day thugging, where you can bring in someone just to ride to push for certain situations, or you can have an entire crew. I mean, Yellowstone gives the image that you have so much help. Most of the time, it might be me on Buddy and an ATV and 300 cattle, 300 head. So ranching is a big kind of diverse thing. It depends on what it is the goal is for the ranch. This ranch had a bunch of packing animals because it also had a packing business. And so there was anywhere between 17 to 24 equines, mules and horses. And at one point they were housing up to 50 mules for a string. I mean, it's like it just depends on what it is that specific ranch is doing. Like for me, I'm going to get 5 heifer pairs. And so I'm only going to have 10 head. That's not a lot, and I don't have any place to push anyway. So, but I need a hand. I'm going to be hiring a hand for my purposes because I need someone to help me stretch fence. I need to have someone that can be here when I can't. My animals are on a 3 time a day feeding cycle. And, that's my choice. Not everybody does that, but that's my choice for them. And so with this ranch, I was responsible for everything. And Buddy came with the ranch, and so not exactly the horse you would think is your dream horse, but that dude is so smart and so willing that now at 21, we've been talking about, you and I've talked about it. He just turned 21 this past year, and that's not an outrageously old animal, but he is old for his age. He's got, if you've seen his right front carpus, it's all swollen and it's bone to bone. He doesn't want you to even touch his hoof. He's got flat frogs. I mean, there's just nothing conformationally about him that's proper, but he is a beautiful soul. He's had a very hard life.
Because 21 is not
I
old
have,
for, he's an Appaloosa, right? But I think the state of his body at this point tells a different story.
you think about that, we don't know. I mean, where he came from, they know his history because they bought and sold him, took him back. I think there was a vet call and they had to go get him from the dry lot when he was 10. And from the time he was 10, he was put in a packing string with anybody that wanted to get on the back of an animal to go hunting, and he was worked and just passed off and passed off. So the theory of, wet saddle blankets and all of that, yeah, that's great. That's great. But overuse injuries are so predominant in animals that are worked like that. I mean, they need to have a job if they're interested in doing it. Like you can't make them be cowy. They are or they aren't. You can't make them want to go run barrels. They do or they don't. It's interesting that people are all have this concept of forcing your animal to do something. It innately is a part of who they are. And I always try to explain to people, like, genetically, I wouldn't make a great ballerina. I loved ballet when I was a kid, but I'm 5 feet tall and I'm pretty, I'm not thick, but I'm pretty like dense. So I would not make a good professional ballerina. Doesn't mean I'm not
A
willing to do
gymnast,
it.
maybe.
Yeah. So I
But yeah,
mean, and,
yeah.
and so our animals are sport specific too, There's things that they're just genetically predisposed to do, and poor Buddy is genetically predisposed to be, a ranch horse, I guess, but his body has just failed him. And so, as you know, this year we were talking about, even my vet that was at the prior barn was like, this is his year, you should put him down before winter gets here this year. And I know it's selfish of me, but I'm not ready to let him go. But I don't think he's ready to go. Like I said, he ran this morning when I came to just hand him a feed bag. He's still able to get up and go when he wants to. And God knows that I'm pouring enough medication into him that he must have some comfort. And so I'm kind of letting him take the lead on it when he can't get up and he's not wanting to eat. And as you know, he's muscled and his body is beautiful. His body is still
Yeah,
beautiful. And so
that's
he's
true. He's
not,
in great shape.
and he's got just such good muscle density, and who doesn't love that fat quarter horse booty? So I'm not ready for him to go, and I don't think he's ready to go. But that's a conversation that I'm willing to have before I see him suffer. So he's that's my first herd member of this group. And then Mule Tang was a part of a rescue mission that I got Jerry and Oscar from, and he went to Colorado Horse Rescue Network. Well, apparently he got a 12-year-old for Gymkhana, so he did a season of Gymkhana, and I'm not really sure of the specifics or the details. I just know that he was stolen, and he ended up back at Colorado Horse Rescue Network. And so um, I went to go see
Wow.
yeah. So he's had this long, winding tail. He was a year old when Buddy was born on the ranch that they both came from, and then he was sold from the ranch. And so if you look at his hindquarters, Mule Tang's been branded twice. He has the ranch brand that Buddy has, but then they branded him on the back of his like hindquarter, and it's like down his leg. And I'm like, how painful was that for this guy? So they had him at another place and used him as a packing mule, but they put a chain around his neck and drug him behind a pickup truck because he bucks. Um, so he's got huge, you've seen the scarring on his sides, and they open up every summer and flake off, but he's got irregular hair growth on one of his sides where he was drugged down a road. So
And
you got to wonder in the mind of a mule what that was like for him. And at some point, he got sold back to the ranch after he bucked. And then he got sold again, and that's where I rescued him with Jerry. And he was slipperfoot and foundered and a bag of bones when I first got him. And so I couldn't keep everybody at that time because I had, at that time, I had Oscar, Jerry, Buddy. I had a mini horse, and I had a baby Hancock. So I was tapped out. I couldn't take it on anymore. So when they made the decision to surrender five, Mule Tang was one of the ones that were taken to the rescue. And, I can't say enough nice things about that organization. So when I went to go look at Billy, I heard Mule Tang. Mule Tang is half Mustang and he has the strangest bray. And so when I went to go see Billy, I heard him and I was like, that's Mule Tang. That's Mule Tang. Mule Tang's here? And so um I just couldn't not
was he calling out at you,
get them.
or was he just hollering in
Yeah.
general at something else?
No.
S- So he spotted you.
He dropped his head in my arms. And so again, if you don't believe the power of impact that we have on animals, it was just very obvious. I mean, and he was being taken well care of. Carrie does a beautiful job, but he was like he recognized me, and I recognized him, and I was like, okay. So I came for one, but I'm gonna
How
leave with
many
two.
years had it been? Like, what period of time had you
Um,
guys been separated that he was remembering you back
Probably
from?
2 or 3 years, maybe.
Oh,
Then so not like a long, long time, and of course I rescued him before, and he was in such bad shape before, and he knows. Like they all know I'm the food mama. So I mean, even if it's only because he was well taken care of, he remembered that. And so he was flinchy, and you've even experienced he was a little flinchy when I first got him. But he's herd member number 3. So it was Buddy, Billy, and then Mule Tang. So I
Okay.
went there to see Billy, and I rescued 2 that, or I adopted 2 that day.
And Billy is another mule, a large mule.
Yeah, he's a mammoth jack. And when we first saw him, do you remember how scruffy and weird and just was in just he was
Yeah, I remember you were thinking he might have been crossed with a curly because he had this weird curly,
yeah.
almost wire hair terrier kind of coat.
Yep. And really what it all is just he's not ever been groomed. It's just like the way it was growing based on the fact that that lack of thinning out his hair. Because I was convinced he had some sort of cross. Because again, he's a mammoth jack, so he's a big, big boy. But he slicked off this summer. Oh my God, he's shiny, just beautiful. And all those
He looked
scars that he
beautiful
had, he's, yeah, and just full body. I didn't realize, like, when I look at the pictures of him, I didn't realize, like, he was pretty underweight, you know? And then he colicked.
Mhm.
Dang, had him, what, a month, and he colicked, a mule colic. They live on rocks and nothing, and then he colicked. So
on alfalfa.
I am, yeah, on alfalfa.
So, what is Billy's backstory? Because I seem to remember when you first got him, you had gotten him from, we thought it was an elderly couple that had surrendered him because they were no longer able to care for him, but then you discovered some scars around his ears. Did you ever figure out the story
Yeah,
behind that?
I think his first place was he was a packing mule. He came from a packing cap. And so they had him as a pet, but he came from long-term service as a packing mule. So he, just like Mule Tang, just like Honey, they've been just used and abused. He's big, so there's no telling the amount of weight that poor animals had to carry around on his back. And they're big and strong and they don't mind doing mules really are smart and they love to work and they love to do a job, but too much of anything is too much. And I think that for him, when I think his second owner was the senior person and that he had passed away and the wife just couldn't care for him. So
Mhm.
he didn't he knew love with that former home, but I don't think he came from love prior. Um
Mhm.
so he is well loved now and he's like just having a giant baby. Um he's really sweet. Just really, really
He's
sweet.
your cuddle bug,
And
right?
he is so, yeah, he's just up on you. And it's for people that have not like that are afraid of animals or afraid of horses or mules. He's kind of like very much in your pocket, but he's not aggressive and he's not like he's just now started when I'm standing, he likes to like put his lips on the back of my neck. And it's this weird thing he does. He just kind of like pushes his lips on my neck. And with a lot of animals you might not trust to do that. I never worry about him because he just wants to be next to you and do something. Like he wants to be in physical contact with you all the time. And so I love that about him.
That's such a huge change in his personality from when you got him because I remember that first day that you brought
Yeah.
Billy and Mule Tang back. Buddy was busy being angry because he was no longer the only child. And Billy just seemed
Yep.
so shut down. And he was friendly enough, but he seemed very
Hmm.
emotionally closed off. So it's really cool to hear you
Yep.
talk about him now with how affectionate and open he is. That's
And
huge.
and he loves an obstacle course. He loves it. He loves any kind of play or he'll get in the round pen, but he really Mule Tang will do it if you drag him through it. Honey loves it. She's like all about it, but it's the food for her. For Billy, it's the camaraderie. He really gets into the aspect of doing the task with you. So I enjoy that with him. And then Honey, she's our latest member, but not our last. She was an Amish surrender. So she's had a pretty significant history of I won't say abuse because people don't feel like that's abuse, but it's overuse, and she's been used and put up and used and put up and used and put up and expected to perform. It's obvious that she's been struck. She's just now to where she doesn't like freak out every time you get around her head or her face. She's not as flinchy. She's not flinchy with me, but with the farrier, she was a little bit apprehensive, but she did good this time. She likes to. Her thing is, and this was the first farrier was afraid of her because she'll lift her hind, but I've never seen her offer to kick it. She lifts it and holds it there because I think she's had to do it so much to keep people away from her from hurting her. But she's
Yeah.
never really physically tried to hurt me. And now don't think for a minute that she wouldn't. We've gone now to where she wouldn't let me groom her, to where she slicked off, her tail's groomed. She wore fly boots. I was super shocked. She likes a fly screen. She loved to have
Wow.
her whole fly screen on. She likes to dress up. She's a little prissy. She likes all of that this summer, and I was really shocked that she would participate. And of course, ordering her a winter coat has been a challenge because her
She's
length
a
is
mini
like a
mule, right?
43. She's a mini mule. Her length is like a 43, but her girth is like the size of a regular horse. This little girl needs a grazing muzzle, but I just haven't had the heart to do it with her. Again, they're all old. So I'm old, they're old. Nobody's got anything to prove out here. And I really like to push the boundaries of how much joy I can bring them. It's like there's a lot of days that I would be like, I need to get them out and ride them. And then I'm like, why? Because they don't want to be ridden. Not one of them want to be ridden out here. They're old. And so that's where I'm like, I need to get a workhorse before I get my cattle because these guys really have turned into, I wouldn't say pets because pets are not collateral. They are my herd and they are my family. And you and I are adopted family of herd. And I don't think of them just like I'm sure as I know with True. I don't think of them as pets or just animals. I really do. I'm very, very bonded with them. And I think a lot of my anxiety and stress comes from I just want to make sure they're safe, And, it's like when you're getting a farrier out for one, it's $100. When you're getting a farrier out for four, it's $400. When you're getting a vet clinic, like we were talking about, or getting their teeth floated, now we're talking $600, $700 because I've got four to float, not just one. Um,
Let alone prescription pain
transport.
medication that they're on long term. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let alone,
I
like yeah,
prob I
transport.
transport hay. So that's a big thing is just making sure everybody has hay. The pasture's done. We're done with pasture now. And so, and it's so funny because there was green grass up to a week ago, and then all of a sudden everything's gone. It's all dead. Everything's gone. The weather's about to change. They're starting to get their coats, which, it's been 85 degrees out here, and Mule Tang's wearing a parka. So they're all getting their coats. I pulled their fly boots off, then dang it, had to put them back on. Pull their fly boots off, put them back on. But as far as nature goes, their bodies are preparing for winter, so they're all getting fluffy. And they're also, my big thing is I like things fat. I don't like anything skinny going into winter. And so we've gone from where, they may be having a small bale and a half a day between the four of them to now we're up to 2.5 bales a day flaking off because I've got an animal that's, a mammoth jack that's 1,300 pounds now, and, they got to eat. They got to eat. And so I think people forget that when they start talking about what they want and what they think they can have. I had a woman just yesterday ask me to take her free horse. It's a beautiful horse, show horse, but it's going blind and it's going to be totally blind. And where she has it at the barn that I guess she has it at, they're like, we need this space, need to rotate this out, and this horse has been here and it's on our bill because you just kind of left it here and it's $600 a month. That's $600 without considering any conditional illness, with its current state. So I always tell it's like you got to be able to like cough up a grand a horse. If you don't have that, then you're constantly going to be in a state of stress. And it's like for me, I work as a nurse, and anybody that knows me knows I'll go without for myself so my animals can have. And so now I have 19 mouths to feed at my ranch. And yeah,
19. Okay. Where
well,
who are
well,
the
10 of them are
others?
chickens. So I got 10
Okay.
chickens. So let's see. Four equines, 10 chickens. That's 14, right? I
Okay.
got a pig. That's 15. I got two goats, 16, 17. And I got Biggie, my dog, 18, and me, 19 mouths to feed out here.
What about
And
the kitty?
20. So I got 20 mouths to feed now, and I'm about to adopt another dog and well, two more dogs on Sunday. So that'll be 22. And it's funny because is I haven't been in this town very long, but I walked into a store the other day and they said, "Oh, we were just talking about you. My friend has a pig she can't keep. It's in town. It's 300 pounds. Will you take it?" And then this lady's calling me. So even though I haven't established a nonprofit, my reputation precedes me of I am a sucker for a sad story because I will take an animal in a minute. And I think that's probably because now as a nurse of 32 years, my sympathy compassion well is run dry for humans for sure. I enjoy the company of animals to humans. And so I've made this my sanctuary. I mean, it's like other than having to go get my Diet Cokes, I'm pretty satisfied to stay in place. I dread having to go into town, but where I live truly is about 80 miles from any place. There are a lot of small towns in between, but if I want to go to a grocery store that has like King Supers, there's one in Bennett, but that's about 65 miles. And there's no large hospitals here. There's not the resources like you can go and go get something. They don't have that here. And I think we were talking about vet care. There are two vets in this town, but only one's a large animal vet. But she doesn't make house calls and she only works like 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. And they don't really do emergency care. So there is no means if you can't do it yourself. And so, although I'm not off the grid, I mean, I can drive into town. It's not that far. I'm less than 10 miles from town. It's a town of 2,000 and it's an hour to an hour and a half from any major town. It's considered, if they call it the hub city, is because it's a stopover for something going somewhere else. Nobody's staying here, they're going somewhere else. And
Yeah.
it's big farm and big ranch, and which is terrifying when I watch on the news that they're trying to replace beef with this genetic stimulated food source, and they think that's a better alternative because they think that ranchers don't love their animals, which that's not true. I'm just like all of that stuff and all of those falsehoods are based on a small population. I think that's we get in our minds about like brushing broad strokes like police department or military. You have this concept, and then I always tell people, how many people do you think doctors and nurses kill every year, When you start talking about this this group does this. Ranchers love their animals for the most part. It's like you marry your life to your cattle. That becomes, you can't get away from that because they require 24-hour care. And you have to doctor them, and you have to be the one to make sure they feed. In the winter, they're at your mercy. And so that's what there is a lot of this, and where I live is big ranching. And it's very sad to see that we may see that tradition of life during probably your lifetime if, everything's placed with genetic whatever it is, smeat. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what it's
Yeah,
made of.
manufactured meat, smeat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's maybe it's
synthetic meat.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the traditional cowboy will
Well,
look, yeah. So when you talk about cowboys and you talk about horses, yeah, it's our work partner. It's not something
yeah.
that I consider works for me. Whatever horse I get next, just like Buddy, that's my work partner. It's like I rely on them and they rely on me to get a job done. And so, that's kind of sad to think about.
Yeah. That's an interesting way of putting it. Because that's kind of how I feel about True. You made this comment earlier. They're a family. True's definitely my kiddo.
Hmm.
But in training her specifically for therapy, the way that I have been, she is also going to be, my work colleague. We will
Hmm.
effectively be our team of two. And, she has her role to play in this partnership, as do I. And I think that adds a layer of, like you said, you're cowboying, you rely on your horse to be able to do your job. Like you're both in it together. So if your horse and you don't have your working relationship, your professional relationship figured out, you're not going to be able to effectively do anything. And so there's this interesting aspect to, I think, horsemanship, that if we do end up going away from ranching, what does that mean for that way of life? And I think the therapeutic benefits that I know True Heart Healing is looking to make sure that we can incorporate to people who need it. What are you looking to do with your nonprofit? I know this is a long time coming and you're still thinking through your parts and pieces, but for you, it sounds like there's as much of the animal rescue aspect of it. But earlier, you also mentioned immersion therapy. What is that? What's the benefit there? How does that set itself apart from what I will likely do with True Heart Healing?
Well, I think that when you talk about immersion therapy and you talk about rescuing, my goal would be, it's kind of two pronged. Um, I would like to work with other rescues to be able to more or less foster these animals to adoption. And so, by the virtue of people getting to get hands on them and work with them, and they get to where they trust humans again, they can have a new life with a new family. And so I wouldn't want it just to be my animals. I want it to be animals coming through that are looking to be placed with homes as well, so that I can work with more than just what I can rescue and keep for myself. I want to have more animals that can have homes, and having the opportunity to have an animal that has suffered trauma and a human that has suffered trauma and bring them together in a way that they both can learn to trust again. And the immersion portion of it, the retreat would be from Friday afternoon till Sunday midday, and it would be in groups of 4 to 8. So not only are you interacting as a group with humans, you're interacting as a group with your animal. And so throughout that weekend, you would work with that specific animal. And then we're also going to be doing things like meditation and goat yoga with my silly goats, because it's a way to help people laugh, but also get in touch with their physical being. And that's what yoga is a part of. But goat yoga is something that people that are, they're not interested in yoga, they're not interested in the mind kind of context of it, that they suddenly are doing yoga and they're relaxing and they're laughing, because laughter is a part of therapy. And then having the opportunity to do things like kind of craft projects. We'll be working to make candles and canning, and I've got my garden this year. It's a first year garden, so next year I plan on having a full garden. This year I've just got summer squash and pumpkins, but I want people to be able to dig in the dirt and get in the earth and kind of respect nature in that way and see the value of growing something and having bottle babies. That's a big deal to me because I feel like that the dependency of a baby calf when it is a bottle baby is they are on their own in this world because they don't have a mama. But then you become that person to them. And so getting to feed them is just so satisfying. And so I really want people to be able to experience that is like that satisfaction you get from just giving this calf a bottle, you know? And it kind of breaks things down to being what is important, you know? And so I think with the immersion of it is for 3 days, you live on a ranch and you don't live in the accommodations of a hotel. You live out in a silo, which is a grain bin that's been converted to a yurt. And I'm not talking like those fancy yurts. I'm talking about you got some cots there and we got a fire pit. And, you know, you're going to cook your food outdoors. And it's definitely not for everybody because not everybody likes to get dirty or not everybody likes to get out and work with large animals. But for people that are curious, it's an opportunity to have that bonding relationship with what it feels like to have a mule in your pocket or to have a horse give you a smile for a treat. And again, it's like it's not about being in a busy city, it's not about having luxury. It's basically coming back to having just basic things and the importance of what that gives to us, you know, how what nature gives back to us. We're so quick to take from nature, but what nature gives back to us. And so that's what I hope when people leave, they can kind of clear their palate of all that stress and things that they think are so important. Each of them impacts the life of one of these animals. I mean, so the fact that they've had this time with that animal and built this even just for a temporary relationship is how strong that is and how quickly these large animals are forgiving and want to trust you. I mean, that's what the amazement is to me is how quickly they respond to nurturing and love. And so and we've all watched those movies where, you know, trying to pick up a hoof or whatever. And I just think that having that opportunity to look at yourself and maybe you've lost faith in yourself and lost trust in yourself and then all of a sudden you are taking care of these animals in that way. It's just to me I think it's a better way than just coming out every once in a while to see something is to have a whole weekend to where you get to become a part of it.
Right. And I think that really the magic of horses and caring for animals, and like you said, really simplifying things back down to the root of what we need, the basics, and more of a simple, slower life for a couple of days, is that even if you don't see the worth in yourself, you're suddenly caring for an animal that sees worth in you.
Yeah.
And because they're large, it's really hard to ignore them.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a 1,300-pound baby that wants to just be up next to you. That's shocking for
Mhm.
people, you know.
Yeah. What sort of people do you think would benefit most from this experience? And are you thinking that maybe this is something you can do more than once? Are people that participate in this weekend retreat eligible for like your foster to adopt program you're also envisioning for the animal side of things? How does all of this tie together?
You know, that's a good question. But I think that the people that are affected by it are the people that are interested in doing it, you know, and I work in substance use industry. I'm a director of nursing for a program that's a residential treatment. And we know we are at an all-time huge level of addiction. And so with the status of people getting done with residential treatment, suddenly they're dropped off the ledge of go live your life normally. So there's nothing really for them after that except for maybe going to an aftercare group. but I feel like this is an alternative to kind of tap back into that taking care of self first, so that you can keep your recovery very present and very prevalent. Envision it kind of as, for lack of a better term, themed. Maybe I'll have one weekend where it's substance use disorder. Maybe I'll have one weekend where it's PTSD. Maybe one weekend it might be sexual trauma. Because I think people that have that Me Too moment, it's very helpful to nurture and grow with somebody that's also been through what you've been through. I mean, we all in life want to have that Me Too moment, and that's kind of where I think I'm starting to gel, is I want it to be specific. And then I also have so many resources with clinical people for therapists, or having guest speakers and having guest programming and guest instructors and guest animals. Just, I want it to be this big collective of overlying services, like for your service, and it's not so much as we are these chunks, it's we are umbrella services to one another throughout our community, and finding that way to seal those holes so nobody's dropped through the cracks. And that's what I see a lot with
Mm,
mental health, and that's what I see a lot
mm.
with substance use, is people are dropped through the cracks because they don't know how to access services because our community doesn't work together. And so if we can build a
Or
bridge
they're
to
not
each of our
sick enough for the big services, but they're not quite healthy enough to be on their own yet. And so there's not something in the middle that kind of
right,
is a good fit, you know?
right. And so this is something that you can use once and never come back, or you can come back as much as you want, or you can get on board and come volunteer. That's really where I look at, is building a wealth of a volunteer army, and having people that also see my vision and love my animals the way that I love them and want to share that.
Volunteering in and of
So,
itself is also really therapeutic as well. And what you said earlier about that Me Too moment, it reminded me of a lot of the research that the Gottmans have done about relationships, where I think as a society, maybe it's because we tend to be more individualistic in the United States, but we tend to think that we need to get our act together before we harass anyone else or connect with anyone else. Um,
yeah,
and
right?
it's interesting that it's actually showing that we do better healing in the context of relationships. So I'm
Yeah.
really
And I,
excited
I
that
think,
you're thinking of this idea of like, okay, yes, me too. I've been hurt in the same way. How can we heal together? What works for you?
hmm
Maybe I can try that. What are you struggling with? Hey, I'm struggling with that too. How can we provide comfort for each other? I'm really excited for that. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this, let alone adding the animals into the mix, where that's also a
hmm
sense of community, and that's also a very healing relationship, or can be, um, for someone who's open to it. So how
yeah,
can
I
True
just
Heart
think that
Healing support you moving forward?
what we're doing is we're starting to connect, and we're brainstorming, and we're going to get it out to communities that hopefully need it. And I just love the concept of, I was even talking to Jess, who you're gonna get some interviews with her mission, because each of us have a different component of a mission. It's not like we have competitive services. And I think of it like being in a circle and holding hands. And I think that's
Yeah.
where we all grow, is that, you've been sending me so much stuff, and as we develop, and those are tools that I can use because I haven't done that yet. And I think getting the opportunity to get in front of as many people as we can. I always ask my clients, if there were services like this, would it have helped you? And whenever I'm anywhere in the community, I talk to people about, this is what I think I want to do. Would that be something of interest to you? And more often than not, they don't have to have had any formal diagnosis of anything. Just the thought of getting out of the stress of their normal life, just like for you with True Heart Healing, the healing process happens when people are receptive to it, And so finding that key that unlocks each individual is what you're doing, but in a system to where, for what I'm offering in my services, I've kind of got this agenda in my head, and it sounds so strange. Like Friday, they come in, and I have these little things. Like I want to do a fire pit night to where everybody's kind of like around the fire pit and having moments of where they can really, in the dark, expose themselves in a safe space and talk about their needs and talk about their wants and where they are in their healing journey and what's been helpful for them. And then on the second night, we're going to do a DJ dance party. It'll be a complete flip to where you can just like dance and be free. And again, you're in a safe space, you're in a secluded area. So you can experience these other sides of you that you don't always get to experience. And I think that the more things that we do as a connected team, and refer, that referral system is so important. And just because I have this one type of therapeutic immersion does not mean that they don't need an individual program for themselves. And so what you're doing, it might be more individualized to them, where I'm looking at a group, a community group. I think it's just like that safe space. I used to have a dance studio, and we called it the woman cave because it was all women, and the majority of the women were ages 35 to age 90. And I really held the dance studio as a place that you could talk about anything. And after 32 years of nursing and a lot of emergency services, sexual assault services, and addiction recovery, there's not many things that you could talk about that shock me. There's not many things that I am not open to discuss. And I think having that safe mediation is an important way to get in touch with maybe what you do need. Maybe they need a referral. Maybe they need to, maybe they're going to be needing more intensive things, or, maybe they just want to come and hang out and help me. Great. Great. You know? So I think as a tribe, really, if you think about that, a herd or a tribe, we as small businesses that are working in the industry of caring for animals and caring for people, that hand holding of, this is a client that I have and I think that they'll be a great fit for you. I used this term earlier this week related to nursing, but it's really true in business and a lot of things, which I find very interesting about, they always say the term is nurses eat their own. And it's like, why? Why don't we help each other? I don't
Mhm.
understand that. Why wouldn't you want
Yeah.
the people around you to be successful? And so, as small business owners or nonprofit, the reliability of using each other as a resource to lean on, I think, is where the success comes.
Especially when we have complementary services like this, where, like
Hmm.
you said, for True Heart Healing, I've really got two different target client groups. We have children with disabilities or life altering illness, and then I have my veterans or active duty group with, very different needs. But I'm envisioning this being more one on one because it's just True and I right now. And that's what I'm training her to be able to do, is that one on one, more long-term relationship building and targeted objectives for each session, with very specific activities. And I see that as being a really great complement for, also adding in a weekend at your place where they just get to fully engulf themselves in this way of life and find another community that they wouldn't normally be exposed to, both human and animal community, with your 20 mouths out there.
Exactly. And it's like, what if we working with these animals and the people that are involved with these animals are like, I want to rehome this animal,
Hmm. Hmm.
that they love this animal and they've made a connection.
Yeah,
And what
right.
better way to be able to field someone to take on that responsibility of loving this animal by having them with you in your space for 72 hours, what better screening tool do you need than that? And so
Right.
that's a part of it. It's like, finding places for the horses or the mules or the donkeys that come through this program and graduate to another home. And
Yeah.
For my property space, I've got 10 acres. I can have access to another 10 acres. And so my goal is to start fostering. And those are the animals that I want because I can pick the animals that I foster. And, obviously I'm not going to get a stallion that's going to knock your head off. I'm going to pick softer animals that are receptive to the process and need to be in that process. So I think that's a part of it too, is the selection of what you bring to, like, for my ranch. I obviously I want animals that can be softened.
I hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to Bee Humphries on the Daily Ride podcast. I really appreciate having Bee in my life. She is one of those stabilizing, empowering relationships that we at True Heart Healing aim to help facilitate the creation of. And I have learned so much from her mentorship and guidance and love and friendship over the last couple years that I've had the pleasure of calling her one of my best friends. So I look forward to having her on for future discussions. She has such a unique perspective on horsemanship and very interesting experiences in the horse world that I had not been exposed to prior to her. So I appreciate having the opportunity to learn from her. I hope this conversation was just as enjoyable to listen to as it was to have, and I look forward to having her on in the future. Again, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Ride podcast. The Daily Ride podcast directly supports True Heart Healing. If you feel so called to make a donation to support True Heart Healing's mission, head on over to www.the-daily-ride.com. Thank you so much for being here today, and until the next time, enjoy the ride.